You are listening to the Huddle Up Podcast with Mile High Huddle's Chad Jensen and Zack Kelberman.
Freeman is back there, blocked by Leary, caught for the touchdown! A 2-yard laser! Fumangali from the University of Wisconsin. 3rd and goal at the 1. Lindsey is in. Janovich, the fullback. Janovich hit. Nice big hit there by Kendrick. He continues to dig. They call a touchdown. They call a touchdown on a 1-yard jump inside.
Trying to set up the screen to his tight end, Noah Fant. He's got some room to run. He cuts it back at the 10. Fant takes it in. Touchdown, Denver. The first NFL touchdown for the rookie tight end out of Iowa. End zone caught. Touchdown, Courtland Sutton. His 5th career touchdown, but his first here in Denver.
And now, here are Broncos country's football priests to help you exorcise the demons of another doomed season.
I have exorcised the demons. This house is clear.
And everybody to the aftermath episode of the Huddle Up Podcast, coming out of Week 15, heading into Week 16. I'm your host, Chad Jensen. With me, as always, my partner in crime that you know and you love. He is Zack Kelberman. Zack, someone needs to check on the Vonster and make sure he's okay after that despondent, despairing, trip to the podium after the game yesterday.
I mean, he really confirmed, I think, Chad, something we've been speculating on all season with Von Miller. It's the fact that he is mentally and emotionally fried. I mean, he is totally, I wouldn't say apathetic, but a lot of his mindset is checked out of the Broncos. 4 straight seasons of losing, 4 straight seasons of being in a rudderless team that hasn't gone to the playoffs, that's fallen so far from the championship perch they were on. And they're just bottom dwellers. They're, just among the rebuilding squads in the NFL. Nothing good is associated with them. So in a sense, I don't blame Von for acting that way. It's just, to me, it was very uncharacteristic for him to come out after a loss and not preach anything but sunshine and rainbows.
What it makes me wonder, excuse me, I'm still getting over a cold, you guys, so my voice is still a little weird. But what it makes me wonder is how much of Von 2019 has been a player simply just like grinning and bearing the Fangio message. Like, to me, there's an aspect of this where it's a little bit of an indictment on Fangio. Not saying that I'm not even saying that Fangio's doing anything wrong, all right? Just rather that whatever Fangio has been selling, Von has tried to buy in. He's tried to be the dutiful soldier and fall in line, but the results haven't come. And so he's at a point where, and one of these quotes here that I want to get to, we'll grab it here in just a second, really speaks to how he's just at the end of his rope, man. Like there's nothing left to say. And it was interesting because most players after a game especially, they take to the podium and they just wait for the question. Very rarely does a player stand up and actually open with a statement, and that's what Von did. And I think we would be remiss to ignore the fact that he wanted to get this off his chest.
I mean, I'm not going to blame Fangio, but you can see the breadcrumbs that were laid out throughout the entire offseason, Chad. Fangio came in there, and from his opening press conference, he immediately took aim at Von, and not in a complimentary way, almost like a way, and he actually said it explicitly, we're going to make him better. There's things he can improve on. He didn't say those things about Bradley Chubb. He didn't say those things about a lot of Broncos players, and I think, like you said, it's all a guess on our part, but I think you and I are sharing a brain on this. It seems like Von tried to be the good soldier. He tried to tough it out. He tried to ignore that criticism on Fangio's part, but after not succeeding in his defense, the Broncos have another playoffless campaign, another rudderless ship. I just think he's at his wit's end. And for that, even though he's highly paid, even though he's a team leader, I can't blame him.
It really is hard to. I mean, 4 years, and we'll get more into it. Analyze some of his specific remarks verbatim. But first, guys, just a couple of quick matters of business. Make sure you're following the show on Twitter, as you can see here flashing across the ticker there at the bottom of the screen, at Huddle Up Pod. Why do you want to follow the show on Twitter? You guys, it's the best way to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with the show in real time, announcements, programming, giveaways, things like that. You want to make sure you're following the show. So take care of that. And then a quick reminder, don't forget to head over to Apple Podcasts when you get some time. No big deal. Leave a creative review on the show. And if you like what Zach and I are doing, give us a 5-star rating. It's a great organic way to help support the show. And it's also a means in which to enter yourselves into our monthly giveaway and drawing. We'll randomly select a couple of names out of the hat out of each month, give away a hat, give away a shirt as a thank you for supporting the Huddle Up podcast. So take care of that.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, Zach. First of all, let's welcome in everybody that's been hanging out with us here in the room. Noble Young, Dre, Alicia, Vitrone, Stu, what's up, my brother? Jess, JD, James, welcome each and every one of you, and those, of course, who I have not named. This is kind of a unique situation the Broncos find themselves in. That's far from a turning point. I mean, that moment in time, that ship sailed when the Broncos got out to an 0-4 start and Drew Lock was on injured reserve. They were, at that point, they painted themselves into a corner, and they basically had to, you want to talk about grinning and bearing it, they just had to buckle down, bear down, and let the chips fall. Joe Flacco, complete and utter failure as a stopgap, or as John Elway said, a player still in his prime, a former Super Bowl champion QB still in his prime. The Broncos have moved mountains. They've changed coaching staffs. This is the third coaching staff since Super Bowl 50 that Von Miller has played for. Drew Lock is now the 7th starting quarterback, and the results just haven't come. Now, we saw, Zach, in the preceding 2 games, this team take on an entirely different kind of swagger with Drew Lock being inserted into the equation. To me, this isn't so much an indictment on that, or to say that was fool's gold or that Lock is fool's gold or any of that. More than anything, honestly, I think what this is Von Miller, the competitor that he is. And also, let's not forget, he's a player who's been to the top of the mountain. Super Bowl 50 MVP. Yeah. He has seen what that view looks like from on high. And so to juxtapose that view from being at the very bottom, it's frustrating. Add to that a 9th loss in a row to the Kansas City Chiefs, who, and that used to be the Broncos. It was the Broncos that were sweeping the Kansas City Chiefs year in and year out through four and a half seasons, basically 5 seasons almost. And he's been there. And then for the Chiefs, I think the biggest thing here, Zach, I'm rambling a little bit, but I think the biggest thing that's getting to Vaughn is it became so clear that the gap between where the Chiefs are, where the Broncos are, as exciting as some of these young pieces are, that talent gap is still a mile long. And I think that was utterly depressing to Von Miller.
It is, and that's a really, really great point. And in that time frame, he also saw even the Chargers come out and put together a couple winning seasons. He saw the Raiders in the John Gruden era. They beat the Broncos handily in week 1. So like you said, what we've been intimating all offseason, Von, or at least this regular season, is Von really is just tired of it. That's the best way I can put it. He's not at the point where he's going to give up. That's not the type of player he is, but he loves the game so much, and he's such a consummate pro that this losing, it bothers him. He hates it. He can't stand for it anymore. On top of that, he's playing on a sprained MCL, Chad. So he's injured, he's hurting, he's tired, he's getting up there in age. I'm sure he thinks the Broncos wasted his prime a little bit because they have last couple seasons, but it's just the ultimate indictment is the fact that Von succeeded, not to Von's standards, but still he put up double-digit sack numbers in a Vance Joseph scheme. This year, he's struggling a lot more in a Vic Fangio scheme. So I think he also realizes that it's not the best defense for his talents, at least right now. Combine that with everything else, and that's why he's making those statements. Like I said, it's not what you want to hear from your leader, your guy that's getting paid like a franchise quarterback, but as a person, as a human being, you can understand where his feelings are coming from.
I want to get your thoughts on some of his specific remarks. Verbatim, let me quote this. He was asked, why do you think you're there right now, where you're putting it into perspective? In other words, why are you coming out with this now? He said, quote, I don't know. We've tried everything. We've tried everything on and off the football field. We've tried all different coaches, all different players. I really don't know what's going on. If I did, I would be the first to execute whatever plan it is to make everything better. I'm just at a loss for words, close quote. To me, Zach, that implies that
the subtweet.
He would like to be a part of this turning around, but at the same time, Zach, also in these remarks, we'll maybe get to it. He mentions his age more than once, and to me, that's a guy that's recognizing that. Look, it's taken 4 years. This turnaround it hasn't happened yet, and that's 4 years of my prime that have gone down the drain. Like mortality, Father Time, it's knocking on his door.
You know what that says to me, though? He named players, he named coaches, he named everything, but what's the common link? What's the common denominator through all of this? And that is John Elway, the guy who he beefed with in that contract saga, the guy that's single-handedly responsible for, I guess, the downturn of the Broncos in recent years, the guy that's responsible on a personal level of wasting Von Miller's prime. So I can definitely tell, I can definitely sense, it might be me reading into this a little too much, there is some bad blood still lingering between the Broncos front office, Elway, and Von Miller. That's what he said to me. That's what his statement stands out. And it's the truth. They've tried everything. They have changed coaches. They've changed quarterbacks. They've changed personnel. They play different teams every year. And the result, year in, year out, since 2015, they won the title, has been the exact same. And the common link there is John Elway. That's what I gather out of that. And it's another statement that he's making, if he's making that statement, that I agree with.
Jonathan jumping in with a $10 donation.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Chat. Thank you. We really appreciate that. He says 104.3 The Fan mostly said that Von Miller isn't happy in Denver. Do you buy that? Do you buy that he wants out? Von's mom mentioned Dallas. I definitely buy that he's not happy, Zach. Whether or not this is like, I've heard it bandied about and speculated that this is step one of a kind of passive-aggressive, behind-the-scenes maneuver to begin the process of kind of getting out of Denver. I'm not quite willing to go there. I want to wait to see how he sounds on Thursday because he speaks every Thursday as well ahead of the upcoming game. I'm in a holding pattern. I want to wait and see what he says on Thursday as it relates to that. But he's definitely not happy, dude.
I mean, let's also remember that he played college football in Texas. His parents are from Texas. They live there. I mean, he has connections to Dallas, so I wouldn't read into that too much. Also, 104.3, The Fan, is known for pushing, I would say, hot takes and clickbaity stuff. So let's not, put all our faith in what they're reporting. I'm sure he's unhappy with this season. I'm sure he's unhappy, as he admitted. There's no guessing or speculating. He is unhappy. That's why he made those comments, but not enough to force a trade, I don't think. Not enough to make this an air his public laundry, his dirty laundry in public. That's not going to happen. I wouldn't go that far yet and assume that Von is this unhappy camper. You have to look at the source, and also you have to put things in perspective. He is unhappy, but I think, like you said, Chad, when the week settles down, we'll see a different Von at the podium.
Stu jumping in with a $20 donation on Super Chat.
Thank you, Stu.
Our leading Super Chat superstar. Appreciate you, Stu, so much, brother. Means a lot. The thing is with radio, and it's the same. Basically, you take, the Skip Bayless wedge driving segments that ESPN pioneered back in the day. You see it now on Fox Sports 1, and that those adversarial wedge driving debates, right? Radio specifically tries to create wedge debates with their co-hosts. So if you're listening to the morning show in Denver, it's Mark Schlereth and Mike Evans. They're gonna even if they don't necessarily disagree, they're gonna pretend they disagree on specific issues because it creates debate. And radio believes that makes a more compelling product. So. And that's really what Zach's saying here is that it's not necessarily that, anyone who listened to what Von said last night at the podium can read between, you don't even need to read between the lines. He was putting it out on Front Street that he's unhappy, right? He was dang near despondent, despair, I used today in a report at milehighhuddle.com. But what 104.3 The Fan does is they want to take that, and it's their job to do this. This is just the way radio works, and analyze it from not so much analyze it from every angle, but create wedges and create debates because they think it creates a better product for the listener in Denver.
It's true, but they're also the same radio station that pitted Paxton Lynch and Trevor Siemian against each other for ratings, Team Paxton and Team Trevor. So you got to look at the source. I'm not crapping on them. They put out some good quality programming, but you have to also think of the fact they're thinking of their ratings and they want to drive up as much discussion as possible. You lead with Von Miller in that sense. I want to address one comment too from Daniel. It says Texas A&M get it right. I said he played college football in Texas, not at Texas. The point still stands though. He has connections to that state. His mom also called out Von Miller. And when you have all those dots, it's natural tendency to connect them. I don't see him in Dallas. I don't see him anywhere outside of Denver next season. This will blow over. It's just a matter of, are we going to see the same Von that we have in previous years next year? Or is this the new Von now? And is his prime totally gone?
If I'm John Elway and Vic Fangio, I'm getting a meeting quickly, calling Von up, and I'm saying, look, man, We took the first step towards, because here's the thing, as a franchise, the Broncos, as he said, they've tried everything, different coaches, different players, different quarterbacks. None of it matters until you got the quarterback. Seriously. Right. You can have elite players at multiple levels of your roster. You can have great coaches. If you don't have the quarterback, it's all for naught. And an argument can be made right now by Elway and Fangio that, hey, look, Vaughn, you've seen it yourself and you've said it yourself. We've got our guy. The good times, what doubts we've had in the past with the likes of Simeons and the Keenums and the Flaccos, that's gone. We truly believe we've got our guy, and you do too, based on what you've said publicly and privately probably as well. Keep in mind as well, Vaughn, we're going into next year with north of $70 million in salary cap space, and we could end up with as many as 12 draft picks. We have a real chance. We're going back to that gap between the Broncos and the Chiefs in terms of where they're at talent-wise. We have a real chance. We might not be able to close the entire distance, but we have a real chance to get close, significantly closer, like competitively closer. Because, in 2 games this year, the Chiefs outscored the Broncos. It was 53-9, and it's never been that lopsided. Even last year with VJ, with Vance Joseph and Case Keenum, both games were decided against the Chiefs by a single score. So on the surface, the Broncos regressed with all these mountains that were moved in the offseason, coaching, quarterbacks, and all that. And so that's what I'm saying, though, Zach, is I'm grabbing him, and I'm trying to paint the picture of, look, one more year at least. Yeah. Hold on for one more year. If you want out of here, we understand it. Give us one more year. You're going to make a ton of money. I think it's still north of $20 million next year. Believe what we're saying, buy what we're selling, and give us one more chance, because that young core is there, the quarterback is there, and that's really the party doesn't happen, the music doesn't happen if you don't have the quarterback.
I think a part of him is trying to talk it into existence that Drew Lock is the guy. He said that about every single quarterback that's been through Denver since 2015, Chad. He said it about from Simeon all the way now to Drew Lock. He just is so thirsty, like the Broncos fan base. I think he's very in tune with Broncos country. He is so thirsty and desperate for a starting quarterback. He is so desperate for the Broncos to put themselves back on the NFL relevancy map. He wants the Broncos to be a competent team again, a contending team, and not this basement dweller like we've seen. I don't know, though, if you can sit him down and say, okay, it didn't happen 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. 2020, though, I promise this is the year. It's going to happen this year. It's going to happen. How much more could you sell the guy? He's north of 30 now. I think his prime is behind him. He already won a title. He holds most sack records for the Broncos. How much more hope could you sell him before he really says, you know what, I can't do it anymore. I'm tired of losing. I'll believe it when I see it with the quarterback. And then you also figure he's going to be unsigned in a couple seasons, Chad. He's going to have to soon think about angling for a contract extension with Denver or someone else. So I don't really think making these comments will persuade Elway to give him another $100 million deal, but he also started thinking about his future as well. That's his last major payday in the NFL, more than likely. 32, 33 years old. What's he going to do? Rocking a hard place, I feel like.
Well, speaking of wedges, I'll disagree with you on one thing. First of all, you're right. He's always exercised hyperbole when talking about the 6 quarterbacks preceding Drew Lock, in between Manning and Lock. He's especially like even Brandon Allen, like he was saying some crazy things about Brandon Allen. However, I think in this case, and I'm going to read a quote here, I think it really is different. I never heard him refer to any other quarterback as a rock star, at least off the top of my head. I can't think of him referring to anyone else. And let me read this quote real quick, because, after Drew Lock went 2-0, defeated the Houston Texans in their house, like with authority, it was a significant letdown. A lot of fans questioned, man, did we get out over our skis? Were we too quick to anoint this guy? Media, they descended on it like, just vultures on a dead body in Death Valley. Well, Von Miller, he was extremely defensive. And I dare say I'd use the word, well, maybe I won't go that far overboard, but he was critical. Let me put it that way. He castigated his teammates because he felt like the Broncos didn't do enough to support Drew Lock in a hostile environment in lackluster conditions. Here's what he said in response to, the question of Drew Lock and his performance thus far. Quote, Drew is definitely the future. It's everybody around. Guys have to get open. The offensive line has to block. Guys have to run the ball. Just cliche little things. Drew is doing what he needs to do. Defense needs to stop messing around and rush the pass and play tight coverage. We have to get sound. What is it? No, let's see. We have got to sound like a broken record up here because we keep saying the same thing. We found our quarterback and we have a great one, but everybody else needs to step up. You can't just lean on one guy, offense, defense, or special teams. This is the pros. You cannot just lean on one guy to do it all or to save you. It has to be a collective effort by the foundation of the team. And one more little stretch here. When you get stars, you know that stars are going to take you to the next level. We've got guys all around, but we have to come up with it. For me, I guess it just looks different from my end. I'm 30 years old, and I've been playing in the league for 9 years. I'm ready to hit the gear and go again. I'm ready to bring whatever we had in the past back. 2 down years, 3 down years, 4 down years. We did that, and now I'm trying to get back on it. I'm not just speaking for me, but whenever we put it all out there, we play hard, and whenever we don't, we come up short. It's defeating, and it's more than just winning or losing. It just defeats my soul to go out there and play the way we play and lose the way we lose, close quote. What he was saying there about Drew Lock, your reaction, Zach?
Drew Lock is the biggest star in Denver as a quarterback that since Paxton Lynch. You're talking since 2016. No quarterback has come through Dove Valley with the same amount of hype that Drew Lock has, and even more so considering the Paxton Lynch disaster. But I think those comments were less about Locke and more about the Broncos as a team yesterday. Because as we talked about, Chad, they let down Locke in every facet. His protection, his wide receivers, his coaching, his play calling, the game planning. It all failed Locke yesterday. And I think, to your point, I think you're right. I think there's a different feeling about Locke with Von Miller than the other quarterbacks. But let's not forget, he was saying that we're going to dance in the locker room with Case Keenum and win championships. It just never materialized that way. He is such a good pro, Von. But he's seen the losing, and he's seen the way in which the Broncos have lost. Yesterday was the first, I would say, VJ-type loss for the Broncos. They weren't competitive. They were blown out. That game was never really trending in their favor. So he's tired of it. It's one thing to lose. It's another to get blown out against your bitter rival on the road in what was a winnable game coming off a 2-game winning streak. So the Broncos totally let everyone down yesterday, but namely their quarterback, and I think that's where Von's defensive lock comes into play.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
I'm just really curious to see how this team does after an off season where they have as many resources to spend in terms of restocking the cupboard as they will in 2020. And for the first time, a quarterback that they can actually go out on a limb a little bit with in terms of not just talking about him that way publicly, Drew Lock, but in actually investing and building the nest around the model or the idea of playing to Lock's strengths. I mean, if you look at this thing, Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant, you have two borderline. Well, Sutton's already borderline elite. In the case of Noah Fant, a year from now, that's going to be a conversation. Is Noah Fant elite? He's going to be up there with the best because Locke's going to, you need that quarterback component to get skill position players, especially receivers and tight ends, into that conversation. And I think they'll get it from Locke, Fant. So you got two of those skill positions. Like if you look at what the Chiefs have, not only do they have the best quarterback in the NFL, bar none, in Patrick Mahomes, but they've got Tyreek Hill, they've got Mecole Hardman, they've got Travis Kelce, they've got Sammy Watkins. And it all adds up to, I mean, you saw how inept Vic Fangio's coverage schemes looked yesterday. It was they tried zone, they tried man. Meanwhile, the Chiefs, they just played man through the whole damn game on Drew Lock and forced him to hold onto the ball and read, and the windows were smaller. Meanwhile, Patrick Mahomes just sat back there, waited for the opening spot, boom, boom, boom. I mean, the separation was ridiculous. But a lot of that has to do, though, Zach, with the fact that the Chiefs are stacked to the gills with elite-level talent at the skill positions. And so for the Broncos, it's exciting to know that on one hand, you might not be able to get all the way there in one more offseason because of how far back you have been set with your offensive line. But if you get one more, like if you find a way in your top 4 picks, I think they have 5 selections in the top 100. Let's just say if you get there in your top 5 picks, you can find a true complement number 2 wide receiver, not an average guy. I mean, Tim Patrick, he's played well at times. Deshaun Hamilton, to me, both guys are Jags. They're just a guy. Right. You can upgrade those guys from the draft, and this is the class to do it. They're going to have an opportunity to do that. You restock the offensive line. You hopefully get a centered and recovered emotionally, mentally, and healthy physically Juwan James next year, and maybe a left tackle. You fix the O-line a little bit. they have a chance to get out there and bridge the gap. But the problem, Zach, that I see before we get too optimistic about what the future can hold, you saw how decimated that secondary was. I mean, Patrick Mahomes in the snow, dude, carved them up. And the defensive line was assigning dudes off the street, promoting dudes off the practice squad to play that day. And so they got a lot of ground to make up, but the good news is they're going to have the resources to do it.
And the good thing is, if Locke pans out, like we always talk about, Chad, I mean, he would raise all the talent around him. They would make even the most average receiver, like a Hamilton or like a Patrick, who I agree with you, they're not number 2 quality receivers. They're backups at best. He would make them better. And that's, I think, where Von's disappointment and his anger comes in. He wants that young quarterback. He sees how the sausage gets made in the NFL. He sees how the new age NFL is all about the Mahomes, the Lamar Jacksons, the young quarterbacks. The Broncos finally, I think, have that blueprint where they're copying the young quarterback game plan. They got their guy. He's the gunslinging type. He's the face of the franchise. He's the future. Now he just wants to put it all together. I think that's a lot where Von's, it's almost impatience. He wants it to get going already. He's tired of losing, but they finally have that guy, and now they're just in purgatory. He wants to see what's going to happen next.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, Lamar Jackson, think of how ignobly I don't know if that's a word. Think of how ignoble the ending to his rookie season was, the way they just got spanked in the playoffs, and everyone was drawing long-term conclusions about, hey man, like there's a chance all that pre-draft stuff that he's not a quarterback. He can't throw the football. He's not cut out to be a quarterback at the next level. He should have, switched positions to be a wide receiver. All these conclusions people were jumping to after one bad game, one bad, crap the bed moment on the big stage in the playoffs. That didn't end the story. That wasn't the punctuation for the Lamar Jackson story. Baltimore used that. They turned the ship around and they got better. And you saw him just grow by leaps and bounds in year 2. And so I think that could happen for the Denver Broncos. That could happen for a young quarterback like Drew Lock, especially Zach. If you give him an entire offseason like the Ravens did with Jackson as the guy, all first-team reps are going to me. I'm the guy in terms of how it's postured in the locker room. Everyone's falling in line. Everyone's believing in me. That's how NFL teams do it. The mistake the Broncos could make is in any way, shape, or form, even if Drew Lock loses these next 2 games and ends up being 2-3 as a starter, as a rookie, the biggest mistake the Broncos could make would be going into another offseason where you are putting on these faux QB competitions and bringing in stopgap level quarterback veterans who, you're putting on airs that they're going to compete with your young guy. No, you have to just do it the hard way. You just have to close ranks around your young guy, give him the full faith and support of the organization, and commit. You have to jump in with both feet, and that's when good things can happen. Now, Mike here jumping in with a $25 donation on Super Chat. He's got a message for Zach. He says, Zach, what's up? I used to chime in regularly on your Broncos Facebook Live. Happy I found you here. Love the show, guys, and we'll be checking it out from here on. Real quick, should Fangio be fired? Hey, that's a pretty strong, and by the way.
Good debut question, Mike.
Yeah, welcome, and thank you, Mike, for the support. We really appreciate it, bro.
Good to see you again.
Your answer.
First of all, Mike, I'm glad you found us here also. It's been a while since those 24/7 Facebook Live, so we're happy to see you here. But no, I mean, it's definitely, I assume you're being sarcastic here. It's definitely knee-jerk, and that's the reaction a lot of Broncos fans have after every loss. After the Texans game, he was ready to get Coach of the Year from some Broncos fans out there talking about him being fired. So he definitely has a lot to improve. And to be serious for a second, I don't think Fangio was this day one plug-and-play coach like we all thought he would be. He needed a lot more time to learn on the job and kind of grow into it, and he's not just going to step out from day one and be this Belichick type. A lot of us, Chad and I included, I can speak for you, Chad, we thought he'd be a little more advanced. We thought he had the history and the background to just come in and demand perfection and put the Broncos back on the winning track. It's going to take some time, but you see what he can do. You see his prowess, and if you give him a quarterback and some consistency, I mean, he'll have a good team as soon as next year.
There's a statement here by, I don't know, Alex Jones. I'll grab it real quick. Locke is no Jackson. And then, of course, a bunch of fans in the stream dropping some knowledge on him. No, there is only one Lamar Jackson. He's a very unique player. He might be the most dynamic quarterback since Michael Vick in terms of the ceiling and the potential. Yeah. I mean, he's a phenomenal player. It's the arc that we're trying to say here is a highly drafted player. And even though Locke ended up going in round 2, premium round draft pick that was used on him. I mean, look at what the Niners are doing with Jimmy Garoppolo. You can make hay with second round pick quarterbacks. Sometimes great quarterbacks fall to the second round. In the case of Drew Lock, Zach, I think that he has, and I've maintained this long before he was drafted as a Bronco and ever since he was, that he's got many of the franchise tools that you look for. They were just in raw form. And it becomes incumbent upon the coaching staff to shape those tools and to create a polished product. And even if we never saw him again the rest of this season, if those first 2 games especially didn't prove how far Locke has already grown from his technical deficiencies, from his footwork to his throwing mechanics, his platform and dropping back under center, all that stuff that was just an enormous undertaking for him to learn and change in just a short amount of time. I mean, he was drafted, end of April, beginning of May, joins the Denver Broncos, May to June, July, August, September, October, November, 6-7 months to the form that he was just outdueling the likes of Deshaun Watson on the road in his own house. That's what leads me to believe that it's there. The potential is there for Drew Lock to have the kind of turnaround season or kicking it into hyperdrive's second year that you saw from Lamar Jackson. Maybe not quite on the same level hype-wise in terms of, Lamar Jackson can kill you in so many different ways. But as a quarterback working from the pocket, doing big things, I could totally see Drew Lock being one of those surprise stories of 2020 that,
Yep.
It's and when it happens, it's like, in media, it's like the natural course just taking its shape. A young quarterback that was highly drafted turns the corner and he's finally loose and he's unleashed on the NFL. I can see that happen with Drew Lock.
I can too. I mean, his second year, it was the year of Mahomes, and in his second year, it was the year of Lamar Jackson. And I will say, though, what's encouraging about having a franchise quarterback is look at Lamar Jackson's top targets in Baltimore, Chad. He has a rookie receiver in Hollywood Brown and a fairly nondescript tight end in Mark Andrews. Those are his 2 biggest weapons. No household names, no Pro Bowlers. That's what happens when you have a franchise quarterback. It can make the talent around you even better. So that's why I wouldn't sweat too much having another receiver added in there, even if they just went to battle with Tim Patrick and Courtland Sutton. If Locke grows and develops into the quarterback like he can be, into that franchise guy, he can win 10, 11 games with the talent they have right now. They still have to complement him. They still have to build around him. But when you have that talent, like a Lamar Jackson, like a Patrick Mahomes, it can lift. Look at Tom Brady. He was throwing guys off the street for so many years. He still isn't, in a sense. Jacoby Myers, no one's ever heard of that guy before. But you know what? They won multiple games. They won 10 games again this year, 10, 11 games, 12 games we'll finish with. That's what happens when you have that franchise guy. So as long as Locke progresses, it's going to make everyone around him so much better.
And it's all contingent, Zach, on the Broncos closing ranks, jumping in with both feet, and completely committing to
100%. Yeah.
Being the guy in 2020. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Drop your pocket, jumps in with a $10 donation on Super Chat. Appreciate you. He says, keep up the good work. Look forward to this pod on my way to work or home from work. That's awesome, man. It's so cool when Zach and I hear stories about how, you guys fit us into your lives and stuff. Like it's truly humbling that you make time for us. And we appreciate each and every one of you for taking the time to listen, whether it's live with us on YouTube and Facebook, or if it's after the fact on the RSS feed, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, or whatever. So we appreciate each and every one of you guys. But Zach, as far as moving it forward from here, Von Miller, I mean, at the end of the day, I just want to read really quickly, and then we'll start winding down today's episode. I want to read to our listeners Vic Fangio's response to what happened here with Von Miller's kind of despondent press conference yesterday. Here's what he said on Von Miller's comments postgame. Quote, I heard a little bit of it. I just think he's the frustration of losing to those guys again. He's been here the last 4 years now to where it hasn't been a winning season, but he's been a positive influence and a positive part of this team, and that will continue. I just think it's more frustration, close quote. And then he was asked Zach if he feels whether or not the team is moving in the right direction. He says, quote, I think so. It's hard to claim that with the season going the way it's gone, but I do believe that, close quote. And then last thing, on whether he talked to Miller about his comments and if they're on the same page, quote, I don't think we're not on the same page, but yeah, I'll talk to Von. I always do, close quote. So Fangio, of course, very stoic, right? Old school, standing in the face of adversity and pain and misery and loss and and not cracking under pressure, and everything's fine. He's like the dad who's about to lose he's underwater, hasn't paid the mortgage for 3 months, he's in debt, and when he walks into the living room to be around the kids, he puts on the brave face. Everything's fine, even though he's this close to losing it all. That's the type of guy Vic Fangio is, and he's also the type of guy that is quick to minimize and brush things aside. So that being said, with regard to Von Miller, your take on Fangio?
Well, first of all, Chad, that was a great analogy. It's a great way to put it. But if he's that guy who's in danger of losing the mortgage, there's a reason as to why he's in trouble of losing the mortgage. There's a reason as to why Von Miller isn't as successful this year in Fangio's scheme, and that's Vic Fangio. It's just he hasn't taken to it, and I think Vic had the wrong approach in the beginning by constantly chiding and needling Von Miller, telling him he can get better when he's the face of the franchise. That did not sit well with Von from day one. And then you go on and put him in this system where Bradley Chubb was looking better than you, where you're kind of being overtaken. A lot of it's ego. A lot of it's just a human being feeling, a human being emotion. So there's no surprise in any of this. I'm not surprised Fangio reacted that way. I'm not surprised Von acted that way. But that's what Fangio is going to do. He's going to try to minimize it and internalize it and hope it kind of goes away. But for as long as Von continues to be frustrated, I think he turned a corner now where he's not going to be Mr. Nice Guy anymore, not going to be Mr. Silent Guy anymore. He's going to speak out, and he's going to make his presence felt. So Vic can only hide that, I think, for so long before he has to have a come-to-Jesus moment with himself, so to speak.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
I mean, the bottom line is this is the worst statistical season for Von Miller of his career, because even the year in which he had the, double dagger of the suspension and then tearing his ACL, I mean, even then he was more productive on a game-by-game sample size than he has been this year. Now, granted, it was only his third year in the league. He was drafted in 2011. This was the 2013 season when all that drama happened. And then DeMarcus Ware arrived in town, and he grew up and he turned the corner. But this season has been, I mean, look, you don't have to be like a graduate of the football academy with a PhD in football to realize that Von just simply hasn't been the impact player this year that you're used to seeing. Even if you're a Surface fan and you kind of watch games as you're cooking in the kitchen, and you might listen to a little radio during the week or whatever, you have to recognize, they do recognize fans. Von Miller just hasn't been the same person. Now, the same player. Where it gets questionable, Zach, is how do you explain it? How do you chalk it up? How do you rationalize? Is it age? Is it the fact that he just crossed the 30 threshold? Is it a combination of age? The 4 years of downtime and just being worn thin by that, Fangio's scheme, lack of talent around him, Bradley Chubb going down in week 4 for the season. Like, Von's always had that complementary piece on the opposite side rushing to help take pressure off him, from Elvis Dumervil to DeMarcus Ware to Bradley Chubb. He hasn't had this for the majority of this season. So there are just so many moving parts that it's hard to know for sure exactly what the primary culprit is behind Von Miller's apparent regression. And it's not like off a cliff. Because he's been very he's made impacts against the run. He gets the pressures. He just hasn't been getting home. The film doesn't lie. The advanced analytics tell the story. I mean, I've never, every year that I've covered the Broncos, dating back to when he first got into the league, Zach, he's been an advanced analytics darling, one of the top 3 highest graded players in the entire league his entire career. Right now, I think he's in the 20s or 30th highest ranked edge player in the NFL. And that tells the story. So the question is why? Again, what's the primary culprit?
I think there's not one. It's many different things, and I think it's a regression to the mean. I think it's just a down season. Some players have that. So, I mean, he's been a double-digit sack guy every season of his career, minus his injury-ruined season. He still has 7 this year. It's not like he has 1. He might get to 10 still, but it's age, it's the scheme, it's he's playing through an injury. He lost Bradley Chubb. And he's just having a down season. It happens. It happens in this business. It's just you can be as good as you are. But we expect Von, being so highly paid, to just win these one-on-ones constantly, to get 5-6 sacks a game. It's not going to work that way. This defense has been injury-racked since the beginning. They haven't had their full complement yet. It's not the same defense like we saw in years past. And Von is getting up there. He might be a step slower. He might be a little more angrier than he was in recent seasons, but I still think you bring him back next year, which the Broncos will, he'll be more Vaughn. He'll be a 12, 15 sack guy. It's just a bad season. It's going to happen. I wouldn't draw any conclusions, but I also wouldn't say it's one thing or the other. It's many different reasons and many different factors.
You know, you hear the phrase comedy of errors. It's a comedy of factors that have led to the version of Vaughn that you've seen this year, and they're not all his fault, and probably most of them aren't his fault. But at the end of the day, he has to be accountable for his performance, and I think that's part of his frustration and why he stood up there yesterday and talked the way that he did. Now, one more question here, and then we got to start getting out of here for tonight, you guys. From I don't know how you pronounce your first name, dude. Ax Jones? Ax Jones? Is Drew Lock better than Jay Cutler? They are noticeably comparable? ? They are very similar players from a measurements, tools, skill set perspective. The one difference, Zach, I'll say, between Jay Cutler and Drew Lock is that Drew Lock, like Cutler, had the QB1 self-confidence and almost, to use Vic Fangio's verbiage, athletic arrogance. He had that, but he wasn't magnetic. He didn't have the QB1 appeal to other people. He wasn't the leader. He didn't have that charisma that ultimately is the kind of the final component that raises all ships. Like the tools, the traits, they get you there, but you got to have that ability to bring it all together with your personality. And that's just not something Cutler ever had. Locke does have that.
I would say that Cutler had a little bit of a stronger arm, but I think Drew Lock has better precision. It's comparable, it's negligible, but I think Cutler was a little stronger of an arm. But I think Lock has better accuracy. He has more mobility for sure than Jay Cutler, and he's more of a leader, a natural leader. Cutler was very moody. He was very rough around the edges, and he still is, even in his reality show. That's just the type of guy that he is. But Locke is a natural leader who all the other players gravitate toward. You have a future Hall of Famer in Von Miller calling you a rock star after only 3 starts. I don't think the same was being said about Jay Cutler. He brings everyone around him. It's infectious, his personality. So if you boil it down, I would happily take Drew Lock, the prospect, over Jay Cutler. I think he's a better quarterback and a better leader.
The one thing I'll never forget, and I bet there are a lot of fans who are about to nod right along with me here. And Zach, I know this was before your time, but in 2006, Jay Cutler's rookie season, there's a play. And I remember watching this and just sitting up in my chair dumbfounded because I hadn't seen a Broncos quarterback show that kind of arm talent since Elway. And really Elway in his prime, like 88 through 94 Elway. And it was a play. I can't remember the exact yardage, but he drops back, play action, rolls out to the left a little bit, and just uncorks this massive deep ball to Javon Walker that had to go well over 50 yards in the air. Pinpoint accuracy, drops it and not like lofts it bomb, like a bomb where you put a lot of air under it and the guy runs under, on a freaking rope, dude. Just boom, touchdown. And it was the type of just raw talent. You're like, dang, dude, now I kind of see why Shanahan pulled the plug on Jake Plummer despite 3 years in a row of taking the team to the playoffs. Jake Plummer did. And the trip to let's not forget, Jay Cutler was drafted on the heels of Jake Plummer leading the Broncos to an AFC title game. They fell short to Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers, who went on to beat the Seahawks in the Super Bowl. But, man, I saw that play. Here it is. Jay Shanty. Reverse bootleg to Javon Walker, 65 yards. And it was on a rope, dude. And for those of you listening right now or live and even after the fact, just Google in YouTube, just search Cutler to Javon Walker, 65 yards, or just Cutler to Javon Walker, and you'll see it as phenomenal play. That arm talent is there. And I'll agree with you. I think that arm strength, it's negligible to a degree, but Locke's dang close to Cutler.
And either way you slice it, Chad, it's so nice and hopeful and optimistic to have that quarterback in the huddle under center who's capable of delivering those type of throws, who's capable of making those 65-yard rope passes. We haven't seen that, since prime Peyton Manning, and before that it was Jay Cutler, but you finally have a quarterback who has all of Cutler's good traits and none of his bad ones. So it's definitely encouraging for the future.
Let me see here. 2006. Let me see if this is the play, and if it is, I'll share it on the screen. It is. Okay, guys, I'm gonna play this. You guys tell me what you think real quick. I'm gonna share the screen, and then we're gonna bid you adieu for the evening. Let me see here. Hopefully this plays. Zach, let me know how it looks. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm gonna hit play. Tell me if you can see it.
Yep.
Is it
Looks
moving?
good. Yep.
Okay.
There's the bootleg.
Boom. Look,
across his body too.
On a rope across his body.
He was rolling to the left too, and he's a right-handed quarterback. That's crazy.
So, anyway, and I think Drew Lock has some of that in him, and not some, a lot of that in him. But from an intangibles perspective, he's got a lot more of what NFL teams need at the franchise level. All right, you guys, that's got to do it for today's episode of the Huddle Up Podcast. The aftermath as we sift through the 23-3 loss, Denver Broncos to the Chiefs. Once again, 9 straight losses. Time to put it to bed, put it behind you. All right, look forward to these final 2 games because, Zach, Drew Lock has a legit chance to finish his 5-game rookie audition 4-1 as a starter. You don't want to count your chickens before they hatch, but you got the Detroit Lions coming to town this coming week, followed by the Raiders in Denver to close out the season. So, Drew Lock, I mean, if you were to say at the beginning of this season, hey, Drew Lock's going to come in, and whenever that is in the season, he's going to end up going 4-1 as a rookie. I think 100 out of 100 Broncos fans would take that all day long, twice on Sunday.
And the good thing is for Locke, he has the ultimate get-right game against the Lions, whose defense makes every opposing quarterback look like world beaters. They just made Jameis Winston, he threw 4 touchdowns against them, 400-something yards, 456 yards or something like that. If there's an opponent for Locke to get right against at home, it is the Lions, and a prime opportunity. I think this is the game where he throws 3 touchdowns, he has 300 yards, and whatever fan morale was lost after the defeat to the Kansas City Chiefs will be gained back again with Drew Lock. I mean, this is the best matchup. This is the medicine that ails him, is this Lions defense, and I would look for him to finish strong this week and next week, the following week against Oakland. He's going to end the season on a really high note, Chad.
This is a good point by Dre. There's a lot of cool things this platform that we use to stream that we could make some compelling content on YouTube, breaking down plays. The problem is our podcast listeners might find it to be a little bit boring who just listen after the fact, because if they're not able to watch the play with us, we could try it a time or two and just pick a clip and break it down. It would be fun to do live. I'm just not sure what the after the fact podcast listeners would think of it, but the opportunities are endless. The possibilities are as well. Zach and I are 100% excited and committed to continuing to do more with YouTube, with you guys on YouTube. And, maybe that includes breaking down some film once we get into the 2020 off season and we're not quite as slave to the news cycle because the Broncos are in the middle of a season.
And Mike, one of our followers, our listeners, can tell you on the old Facebook Lives and on other platforms, we don't have this ability. We don't have the ability to connect with the fan base and interact with you guys. So we're still discovering all these new features as well. It's definitely something we can do in the future. But we have some ideas, Chad and I, to not only enhance our podcast, these live pods, but also reward all of you for tuning in and continuing to contribute. Nothing goes unnoticed, and we are eternally grateful for it.
Amen to that. Guys, thanks again for joining us here. We're going to go ahead and sign off. Make sure really quick you're following the show on Twitter at HuddleUpPod, the best way to stay in touch with what's happening with the show and the Denver Broncos in real time. You can find my partner, Zack Kelberman, on Twitter at Kelberman NFL, myself at Chad and Jensen. Stay tuned because there will be, for those of you listening after the fact on the podcast, you're going to have a Building the Broncos episode on Wednesday to listen to as you wake up Wednesday morning. And then Zach and I will be back in the saddle with a live pod Wednesday evening, 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern. And we'll look forward to talking to you guys then. In between now and then, we'll get some more opportunity to hear from Fangio and more players. And then, of course, on Thursday, we'll hear from Vaughn. And it'll be interesting, Zach, to see if his tune changes, if he's not quite so despondent. But in the meantime, Zach, have a great start to your week, my brother.
You too. Feel better, my man.
All right, man. Appreciate it. And all you guys as well, have a great start to your week. Keep your chin up. Look forward to seeing Drew Lock at home in front of the Mile High Faithful this Sunday against the Detroit Lions. For Zack Kelberman, I'm Chad Jensen. We'll talk to you guys Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern.
You've been listening to the Huddle Up Podcast. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.